goal is not that she listens to no. The goal is that we get to a point that we never even had to say no.
Tell me this, so when you have your enrichment time, obviously, and you are getting ready to go work dogs or a dog or whatever it may be, what's your like mentality going into it? Like how do you structure it? Like what types of things do you generally try to work on?
I like to work on bed stays first because that's just the easiest one for me personally. Because I that was like the first thing that I was taught here is just bed stays for enrichment. I like doing like lots of like leaving the area, making sure that they're still doing it, playing with like toys, stuff like that, trying to really find a way to like make them break it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can find something to work on.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. I think one thing, like as I'm kind of crafting this like, you know, kind of things that I like to work on, stuff like that is, and ironically what we just finished doing with Bean here, is I try to look at like, okay, we got our core foundations, right? We have, you know, leash walking, bed stays, sit stays, socialization basically, right? And then obviously your, you know, toy time, treadmill work, like all the extracurricular things, right? But what I've been trying to do is I've been spending a lot more time with these boarding dogs is I'm trying to, with each one of them, kind of go through a test of where they're at with all of the things and try to individualize then the enrichment to the dog based on what they need the most work with, right? So we'll use Theo today as an example for that. Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of walk you through the test, if you will, of what I would do with a dog like this if I took them out for enrichment. To get a read for it, and then obviously kind of assess what we want to do moving forward. So why don't you go ahead and leash Theo up here, and we will start with a quick walk, just to kind of test that, obviously, because you said initially tested it a lot and then wound up better at the end. So I want to see now if it looks really good, obviously, or if there are still places that need improvement with it. What I'm trying to kind of get everybody to get out of the habit of too much is sticking with like, I don't want to say the easy stuff, if you will, but, and good job on giving that command. He was already in it, obviously, but because you're going to enforce it now. But sticking to the easy stuff because it's easy, meaning like getting into that program where it's like, yeah, we're just going to do bed stays with all these dogs, or we're just going to do leash walking or any of those types of things. We really want to make sure that with all of the dogs that we're working with, we're finding ways to challenge them further past just like put them in a bed stay and like try to figure out things that might get them to break it. I'm trying to kind of find ways to like, when we send some of this stuff like the enrichment exercises to the owner, they look at it and instead of just being like, oh yeah, my dog's going through the motions, they're like, wow, that's cool. You know, like the other day, his owner, I took him out and I just took like a 3-second clip. So just like a quick little like off-leash reliability, making sure that he's reliable with stuff, right? And like this like blew her mind, right? And obviously I'm not saying like have him off leash and stuff like that, but like you use long lines for that and everything. But I want to get you to a place where you can look at him, and once you've went through this assessment, it's like bed stays, fine, right? Sit stays or down stays, fine. Leash walking, fine. Socialization, fine. It's like, all right, well, how do I then take this even a little bit further with him, right? And make it even a little bit more challenging, kind of branch outside of the box and make sure that you have the skills to be able to implement that kind of creative control into the enrichment that you're doing. So that's our goal with it. So we're gonna start with the assessment. Let's go ahead and we'll head out. We'll do a quick little walk and we'll see what we get. And I'm assuming this is already better than it was just a little bit ago. Because this looks pretty damn good, I would say.
He was ahead of me almost the entire time.
Yeah.
Up until
What were you at before, do you remember?
I think I started at a 50 and then I just kept going up by 10.
Sure. Yeah, he's kind of like Tucker from that regards, if you remember how he was like all the way up, and only sometimes did he even seem like he even really felt it. Yeah. He can kind of be like that a little bit too.
Like a bigger, high energy dog.
Yeah. He is like just ridiculously high energy just in general, I feel like. I always say lagging behind is not inherently a problem because frankly, as dogs do better with their walking, they tend to lag behind more because it's like the easiest spot they can see where we're at, right? Where lagging becomes a problem is if they're lagging behind because they're distracted by something that's going on behind them, right? So frankly, I don't care if he's 4 feet behind you, if he's paying attention to you the entire time and walking with you. But if he's 1 foot behind you, but he's like 1 foot behind you because he's sideways staring at the dog behind you, that would be an issue, obviously. So once we get into this area right up here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna then start testing. So once we know the leash walking is good, we wanna take a look at where the stationary command is, obviously. So with him, we know he knows a down. If it was a dog you didn't know knew a down, we would just do a sit for it, obviously. But what you'll do now is I want you to just work a couple downs. No down stays, like we're not worried about walking around him or anything like that. We're just worried about making sure he gets into the position quickly when we ask of him. So you can do a handful of those wherever you want.
Yeah, down. Would that be a down or
That's not a down.
down?
So when it comes to the stationary command, if I ask for a sit and they lay down, I'm okay with that because they're further stabilizing into position. If I ask for a down but they just sit, I'm not okay with that because they haven't stabilized enough. And then same deal, after you give that correction, just give a verbal down as opposed to the pointing. We want to make sure the goal is that they're responding to just verbal prompts here. After that, if we needed to, we can give some sort of help like leash pressure or a verb or a physical gesture or something like that. So just do a bunch of those. You can release them out with okay and
Okay, and then come.
well, so in this case, we'll use okay exclusively because right now we're shifting our expectation to just down. I don't care what he does in between the downs. I just want to see him get into the down a bunch of times. If we wanted him to go right back into the come command, you could just give the come command. But anytime I do this, I kind of isolate the thing. We worked come, let's put it to the side for a little bit, work downs. Then, same deal. If we want to go back to come after that, we can.
Okay. Down. Down.
Perfect. There we go. So obviously before we add any duration into anything, we've got to make sure he's rock solid with getting into the position. So all of this, look at it like prerequisites, right? Before we work downstays in an environment like this, we want to make sure he's like 99% reliable with getting into position, right?
Okay.
And we would also in this session take like a mental note of, okay, downs generalized to new places, definitely something that needs some work.
Because I noticed that a lot of dogs do that. Like when you give them a command,
Yeah.
they'll start sniffing something or like scratch or itch themselves.
As we progress, like let's say you did this the next 5 times he boarded with us and he's rock solid with the downs, and then on an off rep, he takes like 3 seconds longer because he's sniffing something on the ground. That I might correct a little faster, but initially as you're working through this, give him the time to fully make a commitment one way or another before you correct.
Down.
All right, so another little pointer here. Whenever you ask the command, stay exactly where you're at. Keep your feet planted, because right there, you're trying to move out of the way to help him, and it worked that time, obviously, but with some dogs, as you're moving while in the process of kind of processing it, it totally throws them off and makes them think you might want them to follow you or things like that. So stay totally where you're at and let him work around where you're at.
Okay. Down.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay. Down.
You see, finally he's figuring it out, right? We're getting it generalized. There you go, excellent. Let's do maybe 2 more.
Okay. Down.
Very good. Cool, just let him hang out there for a second. So this is kind of what I mean when you get into, like, when you look at enrichment, like the whole concept of enrichment is to mentally challenge and stimulate the dog, right? And a lot of times when you're just going through the motions of stuff, of bed stays in the facility, for example, not that they're wrong, it's something we definitely want to test and make sure that they're going to be good with. But once you've checked that box, you can only make it so stimulating to the dog, right? Where something like this, we now took something and we generalized it to a new place. We worked past a big hurdle for him, and frankly, if he was this bad with this for you, I would bet you anything he is not this reliable with his owner. So when you start showing videos of wow, look at your dog working these downs and downstays at a park, right? It becomes much more impressive to them, and the dog is actually benefiting from it. So once we have him to a place where he's downing consistently, now we're gonna start adding some duration into it. So release him, put him into a down, and then once he stabilizes into that down, just kind of walk around him holding the leash a few times. Excellent. And obviously just be mindful as you're doing it that you're not tugging on the leash or anything. There we go. So I would say, right there, that was good not to correct for. You wait until he makes a commitment. But I wouldn't walk so far away because you are right on that brink where the leash is applying tension. You want to almost over-exaggerate that there's no tension on the leash. This isn't to create distance away from him. This is to make sure that as you're moving, he's not getting up, right? Yeah, just like that. That's perfect. Oh, but watch that right there. Yep. Cool. And then whenever you think he's doing well with it, you could release him. Just encourage him out. There you go. So once you give that okay, if you need to use some leash help, you can, obviously.
Yeah.
So put him into a down next to one of these poles now, and then loop the leash around it, and then drop the leash and walk away. This is just, we talk about generalization basically is a dog taking a picture and learning it in multiple different locations, changing the picture up on them, right? So even though it was just downs that he just did perfectly for 50 reps right there, totally different picture to him, right? So be mindful of that. That's another way you could challenge them. It's all right, the last couple of days I've been working downs, they've been going good in the facility, they've been going good on the pavement or the driveway or whatever it may be. Maybe I test some in the grass and see where he's at with them.
Down.
Excellent, much better. Hi, how are you? Good.
Now, should I use the pump when I release him, or should
Just okay. I don't care what he does in between.
Okay. Down.
Perfect. It's great. So you see again, I'm trying to give you a lot of pieces, right? That you can only put so much of a procedure on this because every dog is individual with where they're at in their training, right? But the more you look at okay, with this dog, right, this is where he's at, this is where he could use improvement, right? Then you got to work on it with another dog. You may get another dog and they do this perfectly, right? And it's no problem. Well, then we move on to the next things, right? Maybe bed stays around distractions are a problem, right? Or maybe socialization is more of an issue, right? We would progress through it, right? But I look at it like prereqs, right? Walk needs to be good. As soon as I know the walk is good and I'm not getting the dog pushing me around a whole lot, let's move on to the next thing, stationary command. That was a hurdle for him, so that was his enrichment for today, right? Then we would move on to bed stays. Then I would move on to socialization. And then, like, let's say you went through all of those, like I just did with Bean, and all of it was pretty much fine, but he seemed socially a little awkward. Then I'm gonna start taking him out and just working on socialization until that looks good, right? Then once all of it is good, it's like we look for new ways to then challenge them, right? We look for new ways to stimulate them further.
Kind of your basic rule of thumb is if you're going to be doing your training sessions with the beds, we want her wearing it. And then if throughout the day, the behavior that we're pinpointing, the nuisance behavior that we're correcting this week is the biting and like the nipping and stuff. If that is a behavior that tends to like sporadically present itself throughout the day, then you would want to have the e-collar on preemptively so that if the behavior presents itself, you're already pre-prepared with the ability to correct her for it. We don't want to ever end up in a situation where like she performs it and then we're like, crap, we don't have the e-collar on, we don't have a means to correct her. Because when we're really trying to eradicate a behavior like that, if we correct it inconsistently, it's confusing for her on whether it's permissible or not. You know, it'd be like a kid having a fit over, you know, not getting a candy bar, and half the time you correct them for it and half the time you give them a candy bar. That's pretty confusing, you know? So that's kind of the idea with this, is that we want to make sure that at least over this next week, you're trying to be pretty consistent about, okay, so these are the certain times of day that she tends to be a little bit more spunky and maybe a little bit more nippy with the kids, or, you know, whatever. So let's make sure her e-collar's on so that if I need to use it, I can. Okay. So really, I would say the main times where she shouldn't be wearing it are when she's in her crate. And like overnight when she's sleeping, things like that, she doesn't need to have it on. Stevie, bed. Good. So because, again, we were working with the verbal cue of this last time, we're going to be ideally just going about it in the same way. The only difference now is that if I ask her to get on the bed, if she doesn't do it, instead of using the leash to help her like we were previously, now we're just going to be marking with the NO, similar to when we would have used like the pet corrector for some of the other nuisance behaviors. We mark with that. We just give a tap on the e-collar, so we're just tapping that black S button, and then I'm asking her to do the command again. So we're basically marking the non-compliance, giving a small correction, and then starting all over again with repeating the command at that point. And again, I have her at like, I'm gonna do like an 8 for right now. The speaker that's right there is actually hooked up to the remote so you can hear it. So if I tap the button, you'll audibly hear it. So that sound has nothing to do, no. Bed. She reacted more to the sound than anything. But the sound really isn't part of her learning process, it's more for you, so that you have a good idea of the timing of when I'm hitting the button, essentially. Good job. That was a perfect time for an example. Okay? Good job. Stevie, bed. You found it. She said, which one? How could there possibly be a bed over here? And still, at this point, you know, speed is not a big concern for me. I am not going to rush a response. I want to make sure I give her enough time that she can hear what I said, process it, and then be able to act it out. So even though it took her a few seconds to kind of spin around, work her way around, and get on the bed, still fine with me. Okay? Bed. Good girl. Yeah, very nice. No. Stevie, bed. Good job. She said, as long as you don't try to do my nails again today. We'll get better at it. I know, that was so hard. That was hard last time. Yeah. That's okay. Oh, we need a belly rub break. Okay. Always have time for that. No. Stevie. Bed. Good job. And you notice how through that whole process, I wasn't using any leash pressure. So ideally, we don't. If I have to give a correction, I repeat the command to start over and say she still then kind of blows me off and doesn't do it, then I could add some leash pressure as like my absolute last resort. But I'm gonna try to go without it as much as possible. Okay? It's tangled. Bed. Good. So we'll add a little bit of distance. See how she does with that. Good girl. Oh my goodness. Oh, very nice. Did you bring any cheese with you today? Let's go find out. Okay. Bed. Good. Let me fix your ears. And she's so unbothered by it. Like, she doesn't care at all, which is hilarious. Picking up the leash, so when we start adding in where we're doing a little bit of distance, and then we're coming back, and we're having to re-pick up our leash, picking up the leash should not indicate that she's done. So I want to make sure that when I pick up my leash, I'm not simultaneously giving her the release word, because I don't want her to conflate those two things. So instead, I'm picking it up and I'm waiting a few seconds to make sure she's still stable. Okay, and then I can give her the okay at that point. Bed. Good. You take your cheese very seriously. See what she does here. No. And so now, I'm in no rush. I marked my no as soon as she made the mistake of breaking the command. I gave my correction. I'm only ever going to give one correction. Okay. And then I'm going to grab my leash, guide her back over here, bed, and then just reset her. But you don't have to like do it fast. You know what I mean? As long as your timing is appropriate with initially catching when she breaks that command, you follow it up with your correction, then you can just take your time and go get her and bring her back. No? Gotcha. Stevie, bed. No. Bed. Oh, wow, you came back on your own that time. I didn't actually put any pressure on the leash there. She just stopped herself after the correction and turned right back around and came back. Good. Very nice. So something to note is that when I was having to correct her and bring her back, when I would initially bring her back and reiterate the command and she did it, I wasn't gonna then follow it up with a reward in those moments because I already had to correct her for it. So I wanna make sure I'm only using my rewards if a correction wasn't needed. So I had corrected her, I put her back, which again is basically us like starting all the way over from the beginning, so a fresh slate. I had moved away a couple feet. No. Bed. So again, I'm not going to reward her because I just had to correct her. I'm going to try again. I'm gonna move away a little bit. I'm gonna come back. Good. And on this time, I can reward her because she was successful that time around. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good girl. Okay. Good job. Bed. Good. I can reward her for the initial. And obviously, distance is not something we have ever worked on with her before, so I'm not going very far. You know, I'm going just a little bit to push the comfort zone where I can tell she's like struggling a little bit with wanting to get off of the bed, and then coming back and rewarding. Good girl.
Yeah, she struggles with distance.
Yeah. A lot of dogs that have more of that nervous disposition, they like to be close, you know, to someone because they feel a little bit more comfortable. So they do tend to struggle a little bit with the independence aspect of being somewhere away from you. Good. But that's why these drills can be really effective in helping build that confidence, because over time she learns that she doesn't have to be near us to feel comfortable. Good. So you can see I'm slowly extending the distance that I go. Good. Very nice.
So is it okay, like, if I do this at home, to have her, like, go on the couch, but also just say bed? Or is that going to get confusing because I'm using different, it's not her bed?
So it's a good question. It's not that it's wrong necessarily. Like, in my opinion, anything that's like elevated with a clear boundary, you could technically generalize as like a bed, right? An object that she could go on. So that could be like a big rock outside. That could be, some people will use like their front little stoop area. That could be a bench at a park. All of those things could be used in that context. The one thing you want to keep in mind though is that, say in your house setting, most of the time when people want to use this command, it's because they have people over and they want the dog out of the way. So generally, you wouldn't want her on the furniture in that context, because most of the time, people are going to want to sit there.
Right.
So that's where I find that using just strictly like a dog-specific object in the house is a lot more effective, because then you're not dealing with, you're trying to tell her bed because you have grandma carrying in a cake, and instead she's jumping on the couch next to your uncle. And you're like, well, yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, but also I don't want you there right now, and then it just gets unnecessarily confusing. So I would recommend just using like her dog bed.
Okay.
So that way within the house picture context, it's like super simple to her and she knows exactly where to go. Yeah. Okay, good girl. Stevie, bed. Good. Did you have a long day? You already look exhausted.
I worked today, she was in her crate.
Oh my gosh.
She's so sleepy.
And you'll notice that I'm only ever giving her the release word when I'm walking back to her. So again, it's similar to, you know, not using the couch for the bed command. Like, it's not that it's inherently wrong to release her when I'm far away from her. I just find that it can create an unnecessary amount of like anticipation from the dog, because say we put her there and then I walk away and I release her. Now she's gonna hope and anticipate that I'm gonna continue to do that in the future, because it's super fun to jump off the bed and run to you or run to a guest or whatever it might be. And so the whole time she's over there, instead of her being calm and relaxed and settled in like that, she's gonna be like tuned in on you. Like, oh my gosh, when is she gonna say it? When's she gonna say it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas if she knows that I never release her until I come all the way back and I acknowledge her and I tell her good job, good girl, she's gonna be far more willing to just wait and be nice and calm and relaxed. Good job. Okay. She's so calm on there too. Very nice. All right, so we've mainly been working on distance and challenging her with, you know, short time frames, but you getting like further and further away from her. There's 3 different aspects when you're working with stationary commands. So whether it's like a bed stay, a sit stay, a down stay, you can really hone in on 3 separate areas of difficulty, which are the distance, like we were. You can do distractions, and you can also do duration. So we're gonna switch over to some of the distractions for now. The caveat with this is that generally with younger dogs and dogs that are newer to, you know, working through some of these things, I only wanna work on one of the Ds at a time. So like when we're doing distance, we're not doing a long duration of distance, right? So when you walk away, that's why we're only waiting a second or 2 before we immediately come back and reward. Because if we were to do a long distance and expect her to hold it for a minute, she's probably gonna fail. You know, because that's going to be really difficult for her to be successful this early in her learning process. But we can 100% get her to that point where, you know, eventually she'll be on a bed stay while someone's ringing the doorbell and a kid's running across the room and you're in the kitchen. You know what I mean? So all of the things can be happening at the same time, but to get her to that level of proficiency, she's already asleep. To get her to that level of proficiency, we have to work on them all individually so that she feels confident with them. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have you put her on a bed stay, and I'm actually gonna have you hang on to just the very end of the leash and stay right next to her. And I'm gonna do some distractions. So that way you're there and you're able to give her help and corrections if necessary, and also rewards as she earns them. Because if we're distracting her and you're across the room and all those different things, it'll be too hard. Very good. And you're just gonna hang out there with her. And I'll grab a couple things to see if we can distract. Maybe throw this toy around. Another one of these. Come over here and knock on the door. So this is where you'll have to employ maybe like a family member or one of the kids or something, you know what I mean, to like run around the room or yell or do things. Hello, hi, come on in. Are you here for Stevie? You know, just random things to challenge her and see how she does. And now she's doing great with all of this, so you can tell her good and you can give her a piece of cheese just to reinforce that she's doing well. And you being close while we're doing this, the reason that's important is because we can give her that immediate satisfaction of you did the right thing, bam, here's a reward, right? Rather than you having to walk from all the way across the room to come back, and who knows, in that time frame, she might fail again at that point. Well, that was harder than I anticipated, Stevie, but perfect. So you could tell her good and give her another piece of cheese. Nice. Oh my goodness, what a cute puppy dog. She said, I can't even look. All right, you give her another reward there. That's perfect. Very, very nice. Oh my gosh, what a goober. All right, how do you feel about the distraction portion of it? Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay. We're not going to be able to distract her here successfully,
Like,
I don't think.
I can't keep cat toys anymore. Like, that's why, like that toy right there.
Yes, she would have gone crazy.
Yes.
Well, at least you know the process. Right. You know the process of like how to correct her for that stuff at home. An important piece of this is that, and you've done really well with it so far, is that we never want to give the no marker in a correction unless she's actually like made the conscious choice to break it. So if she were to be like, teetering on the edge but not actually have stepped off of it yet, you don't want to do anything. You want to wait until she makes an active choice. So if she stepped down and as soon as a foot hits the floor, you can mark and correct for it. But if a foot hasn't hit the floor, we don't want to like preemptively, you know what I mean, try to like stop her or correct her, because then it's a little bit, either we're micromanaging or if we're actually correcting, it's confusing. Because if she's on the bed, this is a correction-free zone. Exactly. And in that moment, if, you know, she's doing the teetering because the kids are running around or, you know, whatever's happening, then you notice that she chooses, okay, I need to sit back down or lay back down and, you know, control, then you can go to the rewards then at that point. All right, now we're going to do some duration work. So we're going to leave her on the bed and begin, again, because we don't want to do a lot of distance or distractions, you're just going to sit right here with her. And you can drop the leash if you would like. And this is a moment where how you could do this at home is like you put her on a bed stay and then you sit in a piece of furniture right next to it and read a book for 15 minutes. Okay. You know what I mean? And she's just right there. So as soon as she gets up, you can tell her no, correct her, and put her back. And that way you can start working on the longer durations of her staying put, but again, it's not exasperated and made more difficult by you being far away or a lot going on in the environment. She's just gonna nap. She said, I'm just sleepy. We'll set a timer for, we'll do 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Mm-hmm.
And she'll sit for a second and she's up and she's
Moving around.
going in circles or looking this way.
Sure. At this point, I would just use your prong collar and your leash to just get her back into the sit position.
Okay.
So if you ask her to sit so that you can have a conversation and then she does it, but then she gets bored and noodles around, then just use leash pressure. You don't even have to say anything to her again. You don't have to stop your conversation. Just enforce it. And that's what I would do for now. Eventually, we'll be enforcing the sit command the same way that we're now enforcing these beds, but we're gonna do that, you know, 1 week at a time. So this lesson is mainly focused on getting these bed stays down really nicely and those 3 different aspects of the distractions, duration, distance, and then we'll do the same process essentially with the sit commands. I just find that the sit commands are a little bit harder than the bed stays at first because the bed stay gives a boundary that's visual and within it there's a little bit more wiggle room. She can get up and move around and spin and do all those things. The sit is a lot more rigid because it is a body position. and there's no visual reminder. So when we put them in a sit on the floor, if she were to wake up from her nap right now, or if she were to get bored and stand up, the elevation and the boundary is going to be a natural reminder in and of itself that, oh, I was probably put here, so I probably can't just leave, versus the floor. Yeah, where she's just like, I'm bored, you know, and it's so much easier for them. So I like to start with these to get the concept of stability for a little bit, and then eventually we move on to the sit stays. When you're gonna correct like the play biting and the nipping, the way that's gonna work is anytime she performs the behavior, you will verbally tell her no, and then I'll have you put it to, we're gonna do like a 15. Yeah, for the biting. The reason I do a little higher for that is because it's happening more spontaneously throughout the day. So her brain is not in a pre-focused, I need to be attentive, I need to listen. She's not gonna be nearly as perceptive to a level 8, you know what I mean? When she's like chasing after and nibbling on people. So generally I have it a little higher because of that. I also have it higher because we do want it to be a little bit more aversive and firm, because I don't want to have to keep correcting her for the nipping and biting all day. I just want to get it done quickly and then not have to worry about it again. So we do want it to be a little bit more startling to her.
So when that happens, should I say no first and see if she's
Yes.
or should I just automatically?
Well, you're going to say no, and then you're going to hit the button. Those two things are going to be paired together all the time. If we're hitting the button, we are saying no beforehand, always. And if we say no, we have to hit the button, always. So that kind of gets into the idea again of the warnings. But if I tell her no and she stops, do I have to hit the button still? Yes, she committed the crime. So the punishment still has to happen. Because if she knows that she can exhibit a behavior and then just stop when she hears the word no and nothing aversive is actually going to happen, then she's always going to do it at least one time. You know what I mean? The goal is not that she listens to no. The goal is that we get to a point that we never even had to say no. So that's where it's like, if you have a kid who has a habit of, bullying other kids on the playground, if every time he does it, you say, hey, stop, next time you're going to get in trouble, he's always going to do it at least once, So that's kind of the idea, is that we want to make sure that the first time the behavior happens, we mark it and we give her a correction. And those are moments where you'll likely have the remote maybe on the counter or, somewhere that's not immediately accessible to you instantly, and that's okay. If you see that she performs the behavior, verbally mark it with your no, and then go find your remote and give your correction. Even if it's a few seconds later and she stopped the behavior at that point, still give the tap. It connects it. That's the beauty of the marker.
And no reward for that.
No reward, yes. Anytime a correction needs to be given for something, we never reward afterwards for then her fixing it or stopping it or whatever, because that's a really confusing cycle of, well, I do the wrong thing, I get a correction, I stop doing the wrong thing, I get a reward. It's its own cyclical thing, and that repeats. So an example of a time where there's potential nuisance behaviors that you could give a reward is, say, it's the exact replica of a scenario that she usually would be running after and nipping at somebody or getting wild, and she doesn't. She doesn't even attempt to at all. Then you could give her cheese, because the bad behavior was never performed to begin with. So at our next session, ideally what's going to happen is you're going to come back and you're going to say, the nipping's gone. Same as the car chasing, right? And you're like, that doesn't happen anymore. And I'll say, cool, now let's move on to jumping. Okay. And then we isolate the jumping, and then we eradicate that. And then we pick the next thing, and we eradicate, so we just kind of go one at a time. So for this week, the jumping, you don't have to be complicit with it, you know what I mean? But you're not going to use the Ecollar really to correct it. You can use a knee, you can push her off, you know what I mean? You can still deal with it in a way that you normally would. Yes. And you might find that if you're correcting for the nipping, the jumping may subside to a certain degree, because generally they tend to go together. You know what I mean? In the same vein of excitement. So if she can't nip and bite at you, her desire to want to be rude and jumping and all that kind of stuff also generally dissipates. So you might see a decrease in it regardless. You said in a year? Yep. Wow. Oh, here's a dog. Let's turn left. We'll pass it. We'll go up straight this parking lot. She'll be on your right. Oh, we got a couple. We got barking on your left, crazy dog on your right. People are gonna think you cloned her.
What'd you say?
They're gonna think you cloned her.
I know, this is insane. I can't believe this. I'm never gonna be able to do this. Well, since she's up. And her tail's like relaxed. It's so weird.
Cause you said it used to tuck all the way up under.
Oh yeah. And she used to be like, she used to be shaken. For the positive reinforcement.
Yep.
It should be better, but in certain scenarios, but usually when she was like really, really hyper and excited,
Yeah.
that's when she was like shaking because I kept coming in and over and over and over again.
How y'all doing today?
Good, how are you?
Yeah.
Let's go down to the dog park again.
Yeah, that dog was,
Is it this one?
yeah, it was tight over there, and it was my mistake. I brought her up there like a stupid. Because everyone's like, well, just keep introducing the dog. So I did it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And
Pull off to the right in the grass here. We'll give some room and we'll just let this dog pass. Go ahead and you can stop. You don't have to tell her to sit or anything. Just relax your leash. And then just let the other dog go by. Very nice. Good job. All right, you can go ahead and go back to the path and then we'll go back down to the dog park.
well, that's the dog.
Hmm?
Do you want to go?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, if that's another route. Take the bridge.
We were never able to take the bridge either.
Really? Why?
She would just cold bank me.
Oh.
Whatever. We'll probably try to do it. And this is like great form of exercise when no one's here at night. And you wake up super early. Good.
Very good. And even if dogs weren't in here, you couldn't walk her down here?
Yeah, hell no. Hell no.
Just because of the association of it?
Yeah. Yay, cool. There's like squirrels right around there too. They have
Okay.
a little colony or something like that. But she like yanked and pulled and tried to get in here.
Got it.
Just like super, super, super excited. So like I know like she needs exercise, but I can't exercise.
Yeah.
Which is like a style, right?
Oh, yeah, it's a cyclical thing where it's like, you know, part of the anxiety and all that kind of stuff is because she needs exercise, but when you go out and try to do exercise, it just perpetuates the issue.
Right. So I couldn't do any of that. So there's just this spiral thing. The only exercise she could get was that daycare. And she was like kind of like a little bit of fence, just trying to like growl and bark at the fence. And I've noticed she doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So since we started this,
No, that's great.
she did it once and then she did it.
And we're super close behind her with my dog, and he even sniffed her on the butt at one point, and she just ignored him.
Never. It's just tough because I have such like a great friend group, and I would love to see them and I'd love to go out, but it's take her to these places. And it's just sitting at a restaurant, right? Like it's not going to be
Yeah.
sitting at a restaurant and watching the TV there.
We'll make her a patio dog. She can do it. Good choices. Very good. Honey.
Well, she's first tried to run into the dog trackers after.
And I think she had like $8,000 in sales.
2 weeks, huh?